How many of you are hearing TAS for the first time? You know, World War II के बाद जब Japan was obviously annihilated, US actually helped in the rebuilding of Japan. अगर वो नहीं करता तो that would have been forever the enemy, right? ये nuances पकड़ में आने चाहिए, ठीक है? तो जाके लिख पाओगे. Fair enough. Okay, so TAS. TAS basically is a framework which I picked up from Hegelian dialectic. Hegel जो साहब थे, he was in France around the time when he saw Napoleon's reign, right? And Hegel realized that history is not a linear movement of one idea to another. It's like a clash of ideas. So if you want to understand history better, you have to see what ideas are clashing together and giving birth to a new idea. And this keeps going on. By the way, this is the whole thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? So there's a thesis, there's an antithesis, they clash. And when I mean they clash, it's not like one survives. It's like something new comes. Synthesis comes. So a thesis is basically your essay statement, मान के चलो जो quote actually में दिया हुआ है, ठीक है, which is going to be a predominant argument point. You'll predominantly err on that side, and some brave souls can say, no, I'm going to err on that side. That's also cool. Antitheses are all your buts. कि I get the statement, but क्या होगी इसकी antithesis? बताओ. What are your buts for this? Supreme art of war is to subdue enemy without fighting. It's the fastest. करेक्ट. अभी कब तक उनको मनाओगे और कब तक व्हाट एल्स? अबे केमिकल वॉरफेयर को नहीं प्रूव नहीं आई एम सेइंग if I flip this, supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. If you largely agree with me, but if you have to give your objections, yeah Rohit, this makes sense, but sometimes if the time is less, the brute war is necessary, right? What else? There's one more point.
But if all the hierarchies that we have seen in previous question that has been used, so
yeah, it's also the last resort. भगवान श्री कृष्ण. Okay, तो their third point, 3 point आ गया. तीसरा बताओ. वो इंसान की फितरत समझने से ये वो पॉइंट तुम बता सकते हो. नहीं, which is an afterthought. वो तो खैर बात की बात है. Okay, I'm just reading. Flexing muscles what? Then you have those other means. You trade block and those are the way in which you flex muscle. You have Chanakya's mandala theory, तो तुम उसके दोस्त से pressure डलवाते हो. But I'm just saying, what if brute war is necessary? When is it necessary? Both said उन्होंने बोला if everything else falls, then it's necessary. It's a very nuanced thing, and it's a very big thing. By the way, I'll tell you, and you'll be like, "Holy crap!"
Human error occurs. Like, for example, from one side, suppose a bomb.
If you're thrown into the war, right? But that's a good point, but not a big point. ये तो I'm drawn into the war. अब मैं क्या करूँ?
The other party would have to do as a
correct as a self-defense. Correct.
survival, sir.
It's a damn big thing. Okay, if you've read your histories, you'll कुछ वैसा. Because ये जो whatever you're doing, if the other person is misconstruing that whole thing as an appeasement from you, he will not realize the gravity of what you're doing. So that's the policy of appeasement. It can be misconstrued as a appeasement tactic. And before you take a real stock of things, right, before you hit the real politic, as it were, बात बहुत आगे बढ़ चुकी होगी, right? And we have examples obviously for that, right? So that would be like your antithesis. ठीक है? Synthesis then technically is like a measured. So what do we do? The thesis is also right, and I've seen outlier cases or I've seen exceptions like antithesis also happening. So what do we do? This is as real as life gets. So synthesis for this would be that you need to have calibrated response. Operation Sindoor में तुम्हारे पास होंगे ना, we have to graded responses, calibrated responses, and all these words which signify that you as an aspirant know the nuance of strategy. Binaries थोड़ा ना खेलोगे, IAS aspirant हो. Positive thinking, negative thinking. We won't talk like this, would we? If we have to talk about positive thinking, we'll say growth mindset, right? Correct? It's verbal chicanery, but that's what they want. If you have to think positive thinkers always think, I don't know, I don't even know how the binary used to think like, but you would say that you have a way to reorient the reality, reframe the reality. That's what people who persevere, that's what they do, right? Something happens and they reframe it. They don't go for the default mode network. Okay? So this becomes synthesis. कभी-कभी क्या होता है? If as you mature up, as you become better writers, you might say that synthesis में और thesis आके इसका एक next level भी आ सकता है. ठीक है? We'll see when it happens. Don't want to spook you right now, but this is an internal thing. Keeps going on and on. Now, when I say supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, and let's say आप thesis ही prove करोगे, तो thesis के points you would be writing all the stuff which we discussed a while ago, right? But I'll tell you, if I would to counter you that, you know what, you might say that brute war has a lot of bloodshed, which is visceral and it's gory. But जो वो covert wars हैं, the way tech and the way cyber warfare render your grids and whatnot, kaput, right? That takes also a huge life on. That's also a huge toll-taking thing, right? It just completely destabilizes the whole economy system, right? And उसमें कितने सारे life-saving issues भी खत्म हो जाएंगे, right? So you might, because of your alienation from the actual ground, you might feel that it's a covert warfare. It's not visceral that, but it might harm people more than what you can understand, right? Am I making sense?
Yes.
इतनी सारी OTT series इस पे तो आ रही हैं, you grid fail कर दिया, ये कर दिया, वो कर दिया, just went for a toss, right? When you start thinking like this, then you start fleshing the nuances. ठीक है? And it's not a day one process. This is a process of day. You have to develop this thought over time. Okay? This came this year, by the way. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Supreme art of war, knowing when stillness allows clarity to return and when should you not. I gave you right appeasement ka policy. So supreme art of war is to have that fine calibration. When should you act? When should you restrain? You should know when the water is muddy and make sure that no new impurities enter. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि just leave it alone. Because what will happen if you just leave it alone, if you follow a policy of appeasement, then Germany's desires were fanned by because other his allies are also coming up, right? So that's what happens. If you think critically, you will say, yeah, theek hai, muddy water ko we should leave alone, let the thing settle down, but also ensure that it's covered. It's a simple thing, which is not rocket science, but if you miss it, you will miss a dimension completely. Correct? And if you don't miss it, you can actually use this in the topic. ये तो इसी में यूज कर सकते हो ना कहीं दिख रहा है ना सेम ईयर के पेपर है ये इस साल एथिक्स का क्वेश्चन है ये भी शक्तिमान इस गंगाधर टाइप का है those who are in trouble remain untroubled will trouble the trouble itself right what does it mean it assumes that life so trouble degi hi that's a given you can't escape that but if in that you don't trouble your own mind and let that external problem come inside and take a shape and be more than what it is that act that awareness itself is curative that will trouble the trouble ठीक है पैराडॉक्स है ना यूपीएससी सिर्फ पैराडॉक्सेस दे रहा है you had philosophy optional right philosophy as a subject also I am assuming you
Philosophy option.
yeah so people with philosophy optional would know how to marinate in these things ठीक है in one of our smash mains tests we gave this deferred decisions only postpone the inevitable which is a flip on this so if you've done this same thing okay and as you get better you'll be able to use FLT topics or PYQ topics as the codes for your essays brilliant you'll unlock a whole new level this also is this year's question by the way the years teach much which days never know this year's question these are this year's question this and the previous one this दिन ज्ञान चक्षु खुलते हैं ना उस दिन you will be able to do this jugglery on the paper itself ठीक है what does it mean basically wisdom is greater than daily hustle yeah wisdom is it takes time if you put time behind something then you will be able to see things clearly okay so there is a classic anecdote of Kennedy reading a book called Guns of August which was a book written on World War I by a historian called Barbara Tuchman and I had given this anecdote to the students of 2025. उसमें क्या था Barbara Tuchman basically writes with all the data and facts that World War I actually precipitated more because of communication failures and assumptions which were not backtested. Imagine World War I was perpetuated to its grossness because there was a lot of communication failure. So there was a Cuban Missile Crisis जो peak पे था, and I don't remember the USSR का counterpart, but अपने ये थे. I think USSR नहीं था. And so Kennedy read this book. He bought the book for everyone in his administration, and he said, now that I know what mess ups can happen, I cannot allow in my conscience कि कल को 20 साल बाद someone else writes a book on me that, you know, that guy repeated it. Because which question came which would validate Kennedy in PYQ? Come on. History पे question आया था PYQ का. History repeats itself as a tragedy and then as a farce. What's farce? Not farce is not a lie. Yeah, almost a very cruel comedy. You know, it's like that very old हिंदी की कहानी की क्या था वो, शेर आया भेड़िया आया something, है ना, और फिर जब वो actually में आया तो like, and even when you listen to this story you're like होना ही था यार, it deserved it, something like that. I mean, unless you're in a good mood. It's a cruel joke on the fate. If he would have allowed that, that would have been this. So in that essay topic also you would write this, that Kennedy prevented the farce. Okay? But in this also, Supreme Art of War, what Kennedy after that did was he backchanneled with USSR and he got to know that they would not just withdraw like this. So they would not want to save a face in public. So there were two narratives given, one to the public and one which was given in the administration. And therefore the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis was diffused, much to the credit of Kennedy. Okay? The three questions from the same year. और देखते हैं ये भी इसी साल का है. Best lessons are learned through bitter experiences. You can swing it both ways. ठीक है? Bitter experiences could be for the person who loses or could be for me who's a victor. In case it's me, Pyrrhic victory, the thing I was telling you, right? I might win but at a huge loss, or I might win but that war doesn't get counted as a legitimate win. And so I lose that thing again. या फिर you can say it in a positive light. You know, all those 1971 जो बांग्लादेश का war हुआ था, it was brutal, but it was needed. I mean, it was needed because of that time. It had to be done. It was decisive. So in this case, if you're putting that example, you would have to talk that such things then need to be done decisively. You remember these words, calibrated, decisive. All these words are the words which show you the nuance of how you should act. Okay. History, we already told. Okay. There are better practices to best practices.